I just want to share my thoughts. And what it was is when I began to do some research, when I began doing, when I started trying to configure and to consolidate what Irene Ratliff goals were or what I wanted to do, I think that readily I had said something um, about business and that effort to do business. Right now, I'm beginning to question myself. um, I knew at one time I was participating some years ago, and I was like, "Wow, this really can be something festive." So the scope of doing, let's say, event planning was something that I thought was a little small. I didn't think that it would be so big or require so much attention. Um, and then that scope to talk about business. So anyway, as I started to experience, let's say, human rights and the human rights as it may have related to um, the Bill of Rights. Okay, so Bill of Rights is the Constitution. Human rights is the Declaration. We got the Declaration of Human Rights um, in the 40s, 40s, and then the other one was about sovereignty. So now you're looking at sovereignty by a name. Okay, so sovereignty by name. Matter of fact, sovereignty can also be associated with self determination. Okay, then it was civil. Civil as it relates to public space. Okay, so that's chick, right? So it was like I titled this All of Them because when I started to talk about certain things, I was just kind of handing out information just randomly. Now I don't do that. Okay, I was just like handing out flyers. I didn't care who it was going to. I mean, this is early on um, when I started. Matter of fact, I was like, I wanted to have a conversation about reparations. So the conversation about reparations with Bill O'Reilly. Okay, and he was doing an opine or something like that. And I was like, well, hey, we can opine about reparations, right? So we end up having this dialogue about reparations, though I did not get on O'Reilly, but those flyers right here down the street, I was just handing out flyers to different people. Um, the thing is now the conversation about all. I had went to I was participating with human rights with LGBTQ, and they were being funded for their outreach, okay, for the LGBTQ community, and then there's a array of different people who are involved with that. So as they were applying, they were saying that they wanted them to say all, and not just look at LGBTQ, like put the label there LGBTQ, or that the language in itself spoke for everyone. So at the time, I understood what they were saying. It was like, okay, well, it wouldn't matter if you were, LGBTQ, that the human rights factor would apply in the law either way it go. So to tell you the truth, the people who were doing the legislation or the policies, they would have been the ones who would have been like, okay, no, it's not okay for somebody to be abused. No, it's not okay for anybody to discriminate because of person's sexual preference. And so this language is already there, okay? In regards to human rights. Now, the thing is that I readily was like, okay, well, this is H for heterosexual. So we could talk about LGBTQ, but I want to talk about H. I wasn't trying to press here it is my opinion on them or anything like that. But I just knew that at that time it was the movement for LGBTQ and the conversation of human rights was there with them. Okay, or it is with them. Okay, where I was. So I was like, well, I'm heterosexual, and then can it be H LGBTQ, right? So anyway, I mean, in regards to color, people were there, different color people. Now, all of them, as it relates to the Bill of Rights, all of them, as it relates to human rights, all of them, as it relates to public spaces, civil rights, and all of them, as it relates to sovereignty, well, there you go. In regards to sovereignty, that's where the LGBTQ come in. Okay, so that would be the same thing, the same conversation as it relates to people of color. You know, we have different names, or how people have tried to soft it so that it would seem like it was inclusive, even though all of that language that we're able to work on is for all. Now, in regards to sovereignty, it's saying something that, hey, this right here is going on and we don't like it. So let's look at mutilation, okay? They were doing genital mutilation. Women were suffering because they wanted to cut off their clitoris, okay? So this was going on in one place, okay? So this country, they were, the women were being mutilated, okay? Now, in regards to the human rights, okay, security. No, it's not okay. But does that language apply to other places? Yes. The color of those people was one thing, but do we agree with that going on someplace else? The same thing with headscarves. Now we already know that some headscarves in some countries are permitted. In other places, they didn't want them to wear headscarves or, you know, the full covering. Now, does that apply everywhere? No. It applied in that country, right? Now, somebody else who may want to say, well, listen, this, that, and the other, the same thing. They would say, okay, well, this case or this doctrine or whatever says this, that, and the other. Now you're talking about culture, okay? Now you're talking about culture. So, that being said, I don't know. We could go all the way around it, but I want to be frank and straight. I am for everybody. I mean, I support our rights as a people when it comes down to human rights, to chick, to our public spaces, to our sovereignty, meaning that you have your identity. That identity goes into culture, glory. That identity goes into food. I mean, an array of different things when you start talking about self determination. Sovereignty as it relates to a corporation's name, a corporation's business. Sovereignty as it relates to a small business. You understand? So if you look at different things, there's a lot of different names. The same thing if we were looking at, let's say, a religion, and we know that it's the book, but then you have these group of people who says, well, I'm Jehovah, or I'm Protestant, or I'm Baptist, or I'm Catholic, or I'm Roman, I'm this. Same thing with people who call themselves other religions. That's the sovereignty part. Now, my work, oh, anyway, I was handing out these flyers, and it's not a thought that was um, that just started in regards to that, but it was this addition to a thought, and that addition to the thought was um, why one and not the other. So now the thoughts start going into, let's say, Matthew, and they were talking about, well, one stayed and the other one is gone, one stayed and the other one is gone. And so I began to look at, me handing out the flyers and who I'm looking for or where that information is being delivered. So I was looking at this person, this video, and this video, they were only marketing, here it is, people with different color hair. They didn't ask everybody. They only wanted people with different color hair. Okay. So the people with different color hair, they're the ones who got the flyer. Okay. The people who had, just straight black hair or brown hair or whatever, no, they wanted to actually get people with different color hair that was not the norm. Okay, they wanted people with green hair, yellow hair, red hair. I mean, colored hair. I'm not talking about like naturally red hair. The point of it is that sovereignty part. Okay, now when you're starting to look at different issues and concerns that you have in your community, and it may not be, let's say, addressed to somebody, then you're looking at another group of people and saying, you know what, I want your support because we need these different things in this area for a reason why. Okay, so now we're looking at sovereignty. Sovereignty can go into a color. I know that readily people have used that. Okay. Oh, well, one moment with this person, they're mixed or they this or they're that. And then that thought readily, while somebody else is trying to talk about once, why not, why one and not the other? Once is unsaid. Okay. Now, when we start looking at one and then not the other, we start to look at C. Okay. So C, as we know it as the alpha, C, as we know it as I, C, as we know as the water. Now, it's not say, but the thing is that now you're talking about not making, but populating. Okay. Who is it that you're attracting? Now, if I know that here it is, this group that's being targeted, it has a voice in whatever it is that they're focused on, glory, then the other people who think that they're missing out are actually benefiting. And we're seeing that even with Martin Luther King's story. Well, Martin Luther King aim and his focus was on the betterment or the amelioration of people of color. So we end up getting that the national. Anyway, we got these people who say, well, the advancement of color people. Then we have another group that says African Americans. Then we have another group that says black. And we have another group that says this and that. So the point of it is that um, it's not to make anyone think that we don't like them. That's false. It's not to say, okay, we don't want you to do this and do that. I think readily people who have accepted people inside of their organizations beyond a view of color thought that maybe perhaps whatever that they were learning that they would be able to help them spread or smear their campaign or their efforts beyond here it is the scope of where they are. Okay. Now, how can we do that effectively when I know that there are people who are already in different places? And my thought is call me because we could talk about it. But then there's a lot of atrocities going, glory. Atrocities is going on around the world, and there are people who are people of color, and they're white people, they're brown people, beige people, black people. Now, if we were to say, okay, well, listen, I'm going to focus on here it is a religion, then those people are saying, okay, well, their movement is inside of a religion, and this is how they're going about doing it. Matter of fact, I was looking at some human rights groups, and they said, well, listen, our focus is to move policies through the courts and through activating people on the street. Now, the thing is collectively, if there's a concern that we do not like, then we're going to address it. Matter of fact, the thought is that the amount of police brutality that has taken place and all those movement groups or human rights groups, the question is why you haven't seen them. Okay, we have not seen them on the streets like they're activated, like they're against police brutality. Now you can sit there and tell me about that religion and this and that and the other and be this color. And I'm like, well, you know what? It's an unfortunate thing because the thing is, it's an unfortunate thing because an organization in this capacity goes along line with their purpose and their mission. Okay. Could they ratify it? And yes, of course they can. They could do that. Okay. So now when we begin to look at, let's say, application and getting funded and all the other kind of stuff, and everyone thinks that their program is better than the other. Well, no, I don't want to say that. Other people outreach may be a little different than other people's outreach. However, there's a collective interest and aim and goal to succeed at whatever it is that they're trying to do. And that may be even sharing money, and that's people. You understand? So I was anyway, when I was handing out these little flyers, I was like, okay, I already said to the wide public, listen, it's not that. You'll have somebody trying to sell colorism and racism in a negative sense, and then you be thinking, okay, well, you're ostracized, or why is not included, and all this other kind of stuff. Well, if you're talking about religion, then there's a lot of people who are involved in that. But if you want to sit there and talk about color, and then you start seeing the disadvantages, or you start seeing here it is and seeing lopsided, then the focus will probably be focused on whatever that is that you find that is an issue. It's not saying that hey, you're not included, but there's a lot of groups you are needed, or people who are needed in different groups to persuade them and help them with the movement. You understand? So it's not to be negative about, oh, well, listen, no, you're not accounted. Oh, listen, no, 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 no. But if I have to teach you things that already established group already know, then that means that whatever those different things that is, that intimately, the people that I want to address is not involved, then it counters. Here it is, the effort and the work to talk about existence on this earth, and that's in more than one place. Now people can say, "Oh, okay, well here it is over there and there," and I'm like, "Well, you know what? If they want to imply that those groups are someplace else, then we have those same groups of people right here in the United States." Now I'm actually abroad, and it's not really abroad because it's just down the street. And my thought is that any of those people readily, if they felt like they wanted to improve their country, then honey, things would have been on and popping, meaning we would have been getting started, we would have been doing the things that we need to do to make it happen. So the benefits that people get from, let's say, an industrial country is different than, let's say, a developing country. That's a whole nother theory. I'll put it there. All of them, well, the all factor applies. Okay, somebody from another group may see here it is the work, or here it is, listen to the conversation, and I like that. I don't know in which they do invite a array of different people to come and share with them what they think that they're able to do to improve. Here it is, their nation, their organization, their tribe, their village, their city. It only looks like it's an inclusive thing when you start to see, let's say, a feudal system and saying all these other dignitaries. Boy, long time. We begin to see all these different dignitaries in different places and stuff like that. And then yet they just go to a place. And then from when they go from the place, they leave. And then how are they applying that information to their country? And then how are they delivering that word to their country to help improve it? So you're right. Sometimes when we begin to look at ourselves and say, "Well, where are you? And why are you, where you are right now, and not up here with these people, and doing this with those people down there?" And then that thought and part and point. You've been reaching out to them. So the success of people and how people may see success, they want people to seem and appear as if they're successful. Now, it's one thing to talk about a job, and it's another thing to know things are activated. So, anyway, one of the things that was being mentioned to me was write a constitution. I was like, write a constitution. We got this constitution right here, right? So as I began, I don't have a constitution readily, but as I began to look at the constitution, wow, I started to say, this is bountiful. That's another whole conversation for Constitution. We can study the Constitution together, but that's a whole nother conversation, okay? I was like, wow, this Constitution is bountiful. So I began to understand that the Constitution that somebody else was wanting me to write, it wasn't really bylaws. Was it bylaws or could it have been a business plan? Okay. So we had people who wrote out, let's say, their organization's proclamation, right? And so that become very common. Matter of fact, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, I'm sorry, the Declaration of Human Rights, it looks just like that. Now, the other one is like the Declaration of Independence. That's looking like it's coming all the way up there from northeast. And so we end up having New England. Okay. Do those documents matter? Yes. But the language inside those documents read slave and master. So now when you begin to look at here it is slave and master, and then you have to decide on which one that is, and then to find yourself in the middle, then we find ourselves to be we have servants. Okay. And so when I started to do the focus on Independence Day, I was like, for real, the servitude is there. We are servants unto one another. We are servants unto one another. Even if we look at people who are, let's say, stars or people who were popular because of monarchy or or kingdom or reigndom or whatever. The thing is that they also are servants. There are certain things that they have to uphold about themselves. Okay, when you begin to look at, matter of fact, I was looking at one of these kingdoms, and there was like, oh, okay, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, and then I started to think about the Quran. Inside of the Quran, the way that it reads, and I just said, well, even though they say it was written by man, the thing was is that it was now telling men and women what they could and could not do, or what relationships and so on and so forth. And then it was also promoting something that I mean I'm not up at 100 in agreement with, and and that was at the time. At the time, this is in wherever. I'm not going to be pointing out wherever, but we had these people who were considering themselves to find, let's say, women afterlife. So these men were doing things to themselves to talk about having 7 women. And I said, well, hold up, you can do, and then that's where the thought come, where, well, why would they do that when they could have had 7 women and be alive instead of trying to kill themselves? Does it make any sense? I'm like, honey, all these men out here, they doing this, that, and the other. So I was not in agreement with that. Okay, so they were talking about how they were able to get, and I just started looking at it a little bit more intensely, and I just said, Lord have mercy. That Viagra pill was real. That blue pill was real. I'm like, yeah, well, why? I mean, he didn't have to do that, or whoever it was. They didn't have to, do that to have 7 women. Okay, and if they were talking about the 7 continents, they could, if they could travel, they was able to get 7 women in different places. So that's where the conversation came in. That's where the conversation came in about men and multiple women. And this is beyond, this don't have anything to do with um what is the man name? It wasn't David. Jacob. Was it Jacob? I don't know. Anyone, one of them, to talk about they had 4 women, and those 4 women, and they had children, and all of them. Well, we got the 12 tribes. All the 12 tribes of them. You know his name. So anyway, all of them, and then we're talking about sovereignty. Well, if it's federal is one thing. If we're talking about corporation, like business corporation, that's another thing. And the United States government has been using that human rights as a form of, from what I have been looking at, been using that, countering it. Once one and not the other, two, and then we begin to look at C. So that means that it's doing this and it's been playing it like this. And so for those people who we had the word integration and segregation, have I don't want to say like, okay, we're talking about Eve's Bayou or we're talking about Blue Lagoon. The point of it is let's be realistic, people. If we're trying to build up something, it's not to be negative about or around somebody else. However, the point of it is that whatever it is that we think that we're not seeing, that's the reason why it is approached that way. If we know that the numbers are telling us that we know that we need more people in team fields, and it's people who are black, then we want to focus on people who are black and improving their opportunities for technical positions and scientific positions. At that point, when you say, well, this color and that color and that color, I'm like, wow, now you're giving me all this human rights stuff and it becomes unfair. Matter of fact, even the HBCUs have been challenged. You have people who are applying for to be a minority at the HBCU because they want white people to be in HBCU. Doesn't that seem unfair? It's supposed to be an HBCU. Oh, well, here it is. You're discriminating against white people who want to go to school to the all black school. There was a reason why the HBCU had identified itself as HBCU. Why would it be a challenge for a white person to put in the application and say you cannot attend the school because of the color of your skin? When the numbers are low, you could go to USC, UCLA. You can most of your public community colleges and state colleges are predominantly white. So the reservation is there, and I ain't gonna lie to you though. I think they're expensive. Okay, so for a black person to go to, let's say, USC, UCLA, and those are private schools, okay, and get funded for that, and then look at an HBCU and it's overpriced, and then yet here it is, they're going outsourcing some of their students to go to a public school or to another private school to get to further their education. Then realistically, wouldn't that be hmm? So the success rate of people actually graduating, we don't know I don't know the numbers, so don't give me the line. And then the success rate of people actually getting employment, I don't know the numbers, so don't give me the figure. Then as I was looking at some of the stuff, there was like, okay, you think the Asians go through all of that? I'm Asian. Do you think the people who say Hispanic go through all of that? I'm Hispanic. Do you think the people who want to say they're Native Americans go through that? I'm Native American. You understand what I'm saying? So for them to be like, oh, here it is, oh, the color, oh, here it is, where I said, well, I think it's a little unfair when you already know if you want to, let's say, decorate that, and then yet you want it to look raggedy over here, but you want to decorate here and all of this, and then you want that to be raggedy, then it's unfair. And Lord have mercy, we know that there's people out there and they're successful. There's no argument with that. You understand? I'm not saying, oh, well, this one you're trying to look at us low or yeah, low, but not low. Okay, as if we're not achieving things. Now it becomes here it is that personal aim and goal to succeed at whatever it is Irene Ratcliffe is trying to do. Oh, this color, that color, and all of them. Anyway, the question was all of them. And so if you're trying to help me wean out people and be like, okay, we're taking on a focus. And then all the African Americans is now, looking at all the African Americans at that time were people who were mixed. African Americans during the 60s and 70s, well, actually, we didn't get the name African American until about maybe the 80s. So African American, it wasn't black. Okay, we had negroid and nigger. No, negroid. It was negro. It was black, and then they changed it to African American. That was in the 80s. But a lot of those people who wanted African American at the time, I don't know if they were looking at black people, but they were mixed, okay, or they were of light feature. So if they want to say, well, listen, well, the black man he over there and he's having they're having mutual sex over there, and we have here it is our integrated or mixed children, then there's no argument with me with that. You understand? You know, we can, like I said, you can look at Eve's Bayou. There's no argument with that. So if the empowerment is for us to have a collective effort at whatever our work is, then it wouldn't the thought is that it wouldn't my people, they wouldn't have tried to belittle it, the effort. It wouldn't have looked like that. Oh, well, here it is, this one. I'm like, wow, for real, that appearance is for real. So I had a conversation about appearance, and I was like, well, appearance could be you appear, appearance now start going into hair. So we just had one case about hair. And then we were talking about appearance, and they want to say, okay, well, appearance has something to do with people of color. Okay, could appearance mean hygiene? Because you know, you got some businesses they have to tell people that they need to bathe and all the other kind of stuff. You know, or wear deodorant. They didn't want the people. You know, there was a time for that. You know, they were telling the people that they needed to wash their hands and all the other kind of stuff, and so people start going. You know, that big thing. It was a really, really big thing about washing food and that's about salmonella and all the other kind of stuff. So we had that big thing about that. So appearance, when we identify appearance, it's like, what does it mean? Okay, could appearance be features? And then readily, if somebody was to question, oh, well, this black, and it was like, well, now you got people who are identifying themselves as black, and then they were going to people of color. Well, here it is, the mixed ones. All of them, it was asking me, all of them. And I just said, well, I don't know what you mean by all of them when I was over here. And that was not the other side. And I'm like, wow, for real, we really do have a government of people where their interests and focus we assume, have been beyond color. Meaning that the interest was rarely there, like the conversation about, for an example, voting rights. People are winning the right to vote, and that's on just residency. And then they're not citizens. So what are the people who are talking about Voting Rights Act? What is it that they're doing about improving when it went back to the Supreme Court? Now, somebody who's just a resident and they have more rights to vote than people who've been living here, natives, all their life, and they have to be questioned about the right to vote. So now we start talking about the work. The work. How's the work being applied? All of them, it's okay, people. It's okay. It's all right to love yourself and like yourself and say, okay, well, you know what? My work is focused here. You know, at a time they had the little thing, check the box, check the box, or what color you are. Matter of fact, we're about to do a big consensus right now, coming up 2020, they say, where you could check the box of what color you are and all that other kind of stuff. And here it is, the funding, how the funding is going to be applied. So there's enough funding for one thing or the other. We just have extra stuff or more things to check than we did maybe, let's say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's all right to say, you know what? Well, yes, my interest or my work is applied here. I understand about the funding and everything like that. But as long as you got human rights in there and you want to talk about diversity and inclusion, and then yet here it is, some things are not being addressed, and we're seeing all these things going on, and people up there rallying and saying no justice, no peace, and here it is, and we want empowerment. And then they'll be like, okay, well, what's the empowerment? What do you mean by that? Okay, well, we want to have more say in our communities, and then yet here it is, you end up getting these officers in your community that don't live in your community, or they coming from another part, and then they coming in, and then here it is, something go down, and then you trying to address it, and this, that, and the other, or you trying to get funding from the bank, and then all the loans, and they want to talk about predatory lending. We got people on the streets. We could talk about immigration all day long. Matter of fact, my scope of immigration and the conversation of immigration is what is the ease of people who have migrated to this country under refugees or under asylum. What convenience do they have? What ease do they have to go back home and build their country? But if they're trying to sit there and rotate it, like, okay, well, now that you made our American dollar and got our American education or wherever they went, and then we want you to pay big dollars to go back and try to build your, I think it's unfair. They were dislocated people. Matter of fact, I'm like, well, why are they moving these people outside their country when the country itself is large? I mean, it ain't like, okay, us being here. Matter of fact, even I ain't gonna lie to you, that's a long walk from, let's say, from here to get to the beach. That's a whole nother area or part of town. You understand where I'm coming from? That's a long ass walk. You know what I mean? So if we was to say here and say, okay, man, well, that ain't too far, but it's almost about the same distance. But I had went to, let's say, the northern part of, that's a long walk. But if you're relocating people and saying, okay, we're moving you, you're coming over here, we're going to change your name, we're going to go through all this process. Okay, now the question would be for any of those immigration people who are talking about immigration, how is it that those people, once they actually go through whatever process that is, to actually be able to raise home? Okay, so we're starting to see a little cycle there, but then okay, well, what about people of color? Well, at that point, us as an organization, or me as a servant, me, having a conversation, a dialogue with somebody else like that, then I'm willing to go and communicate with that. But people that you have that's right there, and people are right now working on dual citizenship in different places. You understand? So all of them, well, I think the conversation in itself, you're right, it works for all of them. But then they wanted to make it seem like, oh, it's so straggly. Your people don't want to do nothing. Is it mixed? Is it mixed? And I said, well, we do have the Rainbow Push Coalition. I don't know about some of the other groups, but we do have ACLU. We do have Legal Aid. And I mean, there's the outreach of the matter of fact, the resources seem like it's just predominantly right now focused on people in immigration. I don't know readily if we have a group of people that wants to go out there. I did see something on, what was it, ACLU, where they wanted to focus on people who are in prison. We have people who are out there talking about the prison pipeline and education. So those people, they're focusing on that. I don't think they had anything to do with color. They were focused on people being abused inside the prisons. Okay, and people who are getting out. We got people who focus on veterans. They didn't care one thing or the other. And then you got some people who say, "Oh, hey, I'm going to focus on Asian veterans. I'm Asian." I don't know. So the chick part of it, chick, I explained it earlier, but it's Constitution, all of that, including the Bill of Rights, human rights, the Declaration of Human Rights, independence as it relates to sovereignty. The thing is that some corporations have bylaws and they also actually have missions and goals, okay, under the sovereignty. It's like ice cream. There's Ben and Jerry's, and then you have Thrifty ice cream. All of them have their own identity. Okay. You can look at a car. Okay, you can look at Ford. You can look at Tesla. You can look at BMW. You can look at Saturn. You can look at Lincoln and whoever else. They have a sovereignty aspect of it because they're dealing with employment law. And ain't this but see, like we on law. That's different than when you start talking about culture, when you're trying to be a part of saving culture. Okay? Now they may have a culture. You got some people say, well, we culture, and I was looking at here it is, all this culture to talk about, oh, the East Bayou. Oh, I mean, we got some Cajuns right now today. They said they're white. Okay, I mean, it's just like, oh, well, what is it? It's us, and it is. And honey, I was like, I've always known these people to be people, dark skinned people. Now they look at beige and white and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so be it. I mean, ain't no argument because they want to sit there and say, well, your man, he wanted to be part of our milk team. I'm like, okay, well, boo, why you got me going through all of that? I don't want. Okay, boo, it's good. Civil. Okay, civil is public. That was public spaces. And what happened during that time, during the 60s, during that whole Voting Rights Act, for businesses, it gave businesses the right to serve. Because they were sitting in and the thing. We saw that recently with Starbucks. Okay, so the right to serve. That's what they gave businesses. So there was a lot of stuff. That's why I'm like, well, honey, you're right. When we have this little conversation about any of that, honey, let's make it happen. Because some people had a miscommunication, misunderstanding about what was going on. Okay? So there are a lot of people right now in Emmett Park. You have in East Atlanta, you got a lot of people who are white. And a lot of people who's taking advantage of human rights right now are people who are coming from, but it's not worldwide. That's the thing. You would think that readily a lot of people would have. In some places they do use that language. The same thing with Gandhi. But are they the only ones? No, we got a lot of people around the world who talk about human rights issues inside their country. If you're studying human rights, then you would know it. It's the language and the movement that makes things happen for people to want to keep up the dialogue. For the United States civil rights became the face of Martin Luther King, but it was in public spaces. If you think about it, he was also talking about government jobs, picking up trash, waste management was a Martin Luther King movement. Public transportation. Most of these things were municipal and federal. Waste management became a federal thing. Public transportation too. There was a couple other things there as well. Okay, so oh, here it is. It's like, well, yeah, all of us, you dang all right, but there's a sovereignty in there. Okay, if you want to be like, oh, here it is, we want this group of people. Now you're changing the way. Here it is. We saw culture, we saw dance, we saw how we prepared our food, or how we wore our scarves. You understand? And so you have people say, oh, well, these people, they become Americanized or Westernized and all other kind of stuff. And then I just said, well, what about the East? They were already doing that. And don't get it twisted. People, I mean, if we're sitting there saying, okay, well, listen, this is the reason why we chop down a cherry tree because we want to save, here it is, our culture and this, that, and the other. We want to save the way we dress and all that kind of stuff. Wonderful. Because outside of that, those same people, if they were working, they had to put on another dress. Okay, no different than, let's say, the culture of business. People who are I don't want to say that, but in a driven, let's say, corporate world, their dress code is a little different than somebody who may wear uniform, or a person who has to wear a t-shirt and a pair of jeans, even though that's uniform. Okay, so it's not. Oh, okay. Well, we don't. Matter of fact, I was at this place, and this man said, "Well, listen, we want." This is another place. I was in another place talking to another people about another place, and I said, "But that's not their culture." I was like, that infusion is something different than here it is. I'm aware of for those particular people that you're talking about. So why would you try to infuse that? That's my thought on that here when we're trying to preserve culture. Matter of fact, even these other people, boy, they didn't even want to even play their own stuff. They had other people who are considering managing it. And so people who are looking at whatever that is, what was happening was that it was now being defaced, or the face of it was changing. But for those people who want to tell me about the music, and I'm like, well, that's not the music. Even from your place that you're talking about, you were talking about it being here. Though when I was there, I thought, when I was actually there at this particular place, I was just like, wow, why does the music sound like it sounds? But it was like whiny. It was like up and down, up and down. And I just like, wow, where is this coming from? And it was actually coming from Europe. But they were used to that. They thought it was something, good. I mean, I danced to it, but I was just like, wow. I was like, wow. Anyway, chick. What do you mean? Chick. Okay. All of them.